Good morning, everybody. Um, Remember, I'm sure you all know with your videos, cameras off and mute on. And it's a lovely, lovely rainy day, and it's a perfect lunchtime afternoon to make yourself a cup of tea, coffee, and have a good listen, as we're really privileged and honoured to have Ivana Primorac with us. Who I have to say, when I looked up your IMBD, even, oh my God, I think you're a workaholic, or you're a woman with a vision, or both.
And workaholic and getting older. That's why the CV is getting longer.
But welcome, Ivana. Lovely to have you. And Chrissy we'll start with the questions and things and begin.
Oh, are we starting? Hey. Well, hello, Ivana, you're right. And I mean, you really have got the most impressive CV, like sort of seriously impressive. And I'm very envious of it as well. So I'm going to start off to asking you about The Darkest Hour. Okay. That marks your 5th collaboration with Joe Wright, who's a mutual friend. He's a lovely, lovely guy. Can you talk about the transformation of Gary Oldman and the collaboration between yourself, Joe the director, and Gary's personal team?
Absolutely, yes. I have somehow worked with Joe for 5-6 times, I think. And he's always very hands-on with his designs, with production design, with costume, and with hair and makeup. He's very visual, which makes it very easy, and he's very easily, he can communicate very easily what he wants. When he asked me to do The Darkest Hour, I thought, well, that's wonderful, because Gary will have a specialist makeup artist on board, Kazuhiro, dealing with this. So I don't have to worry about that. And very early on, I realized that Joe was asking me questions as the tests were starting to progress and happen, which is months before we started shooting. Joe needed a bit of help with advice about what he's seeing and what was happening and at every stage. And that became very interesting, because I became almost like Joe's assistant with an opinion, as none of us were seeing what was going on in LA when they were doing their tests and the photographs would arrive. We could all react very honestly at what we were seeing. And so that formula kind of stayed. And it was then, it became quite easy, because we could all communicate between ourselves quite honestly, because once you get into the same room together, we become a bit more subjective, I think. Then you're a bit more careful not to hurt someone's feelings. You could see that might have been a hot day and things are not sticking down properly. You can see their problems, and you can become, as I say, a bit more subjective. When they're just photographs and videos arrive, and you can literally just say, does this look a bit like this? Or does this look like any old man? And because those processes were so good from the first one, it never looked like a prosthetic. It always looked so real. It was really about what we're seeing and epitomizing Churchill. So I could, with a bit more knowledge about makeup, I could translate to what we were all feeling into words for him to communicate back to Gary Oldman and Kazuhiro. And that worked really well, because they were obsessed with certain things like the complete likeness. It was very important to Gary, like the distance between his eyes. And then you kind of go, well, we can't change the distance between your eyes, because that's how obsessive it gets when you're trying to do something as important as this. So that was our process. We literally started communicating months before, and then eventually, when it came down to the last test, Jacqueline and I and Joe would travel to LA, and we would have another go and improve on things that we all thought were lacking or not so great. And then we were kind of well rehearsed together in a team that is allowed to say an opinion, have an opinion, because we were all working towards the same goal.
Do you know, it's so interesting. I mean, you've literally, the first thing that you said resonated with me so loudly as a designer. And I had exactly that with on Aladdin, with Will Smith, with Pearson Judy, with his personal makeup team, who travel the world with him. I've been with him for years and years, and I've got so much respect for them. But the thing is my relationship with Guy Ritchie is a very, you know, he needed me to be able to translate. They were sending over images of what they was doing in LA to make Will into the genie, which again is an iconic figure. You know, I mean, I know it's a Disney thing, but it's a well-loved, well-known look, you know. And we had exactly the same thing where I had to translate to Guy what can and can't be done. You know, and in the end, I was just like, guys, please don't, you know, we've got to not send over visuals of just what some storyboard artist has done or you know, some Photoshop thing. We kind of need to see it on Will. And in the end, I know with us, we kind of, you know, until we got everybody into the same country, you know, it was kind of that thing of almost saying to Guy, it's okay, everything's going to be fine as long as we've got wigs made. And we can cut them into, if we want a pom-pom, if we want a mohawk, whatever, as long as we've got the right stuff made, let's just work from there backwards, you know. But at the end of the day, until we've got everybody in the same room, as long as we know we've got that working relationship that I can identify with and translate what Guy is worried about, like as you do, Joe. And it's like you say, it's a communication that you can almost placate and say in makeup terms what his worry is. And that it's not always about just transforming somebody into an identical image. It's about what you can feasibly, physically do to somebody's face. Because much as prosthetics are incredible, you know, like you say, you can't make the eyes wider apart, and you can't. There's so many things you can't do. You know, we can change chin shapes, we can do everything, but at the end of the day, you know, these little peepers are removable. You know,
and when you have very strong actors like Will and like Gary, they have very strong opinion, and in this sort of situation, it's very, very hard to come to persuade them that what they see is actually straight on or on a side in a mirror, and what we see as the audience is a slightly different image. And I do, you know, so there's always seems to be like maybe there is a little bit of not a fight, but there's a persuasion process. You have to gain the trust of someone like Gary. You work with Gary. You know, there's a lot of, you have to sort of go, right, okay, I do get it that you want X, Y, and Z, but actually doesn't translate like that on the screen. So then, you know, and with Will the same, he's very, very strong-minded. He knows his stuff and what suits him, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's fulfilling the task or the brief.
I mean, I do think as well, with that sort of caliber of actors, there's something really wonderful about how they can watch themselves as the third person. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of, I get this so much, especially when I'm doing my new films, where sometimes an ego will get in the way. But when you're working with those kind of actors, they're literally looking at their character that they've provided. And they can be really quite cynical about it. I love working with actors, honestly. Anyway, I'll go on a tangent there about how clever actors are. I always say they can bring an awful lot to the table. Right, did you have to set up a separate budget for his look? Because was it working title?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting. It's an interesting question. When I started and joined, Kazuhiro was already working in on board, and he set the budget for the whole prosthetic process, including the wigs. Including the wigs. So then I set my budget for the rest of the characters and the rest of the wigs. Now, then during this process, it became very, very apparent that they will need to change Gary's wigs, and they will need not 1, but 8. And I became very involved with that. And we then rejigged the budget together. I got very involved. I begged and asked and had meetings about it. And together we gained, with some of my budget coming off, and we treated it as one film and one budget together, because it was not going to happen with one wig.
Yeah.
I think because here I was hoping there may be 2, but it sort of grew to quite a lot. And we did it together. So in the end, I think it became a joint thing, but it started off as a separate thing.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, isn't it? I think that's another thing that comes with experience. You can kind of immediately spot something that could run out of control budget-wise. And I think when you're doing something that is as dramatic as that, you know, you've got to budget for the wear and tear. I mean, you've got to have a contingency in there.
Yeah. And also it's the speed. They want us to work at certain speed. And that was one of the things that, you know, they saved on CGI at the end and fixing things, you know, and lots of things. And the speed in the morning, it was just so much more seamless with literally, it almost came to 1 wig a week.
So asking that, just out of curiosity, did you have to cater for a double? You know, sometimes with makeups that take a long time, we'll kind of create a double that they can almost do a shot over shoulder shot to buy us time in the morning. Did you have anything like that?
No. No, because it's all him and his movement and it was very little they could do. So we would do other things without him in the morning, and they practiced. In the end, interestingly, the whole makeup ended up being his shaved head, the wig that was very simple because if he was fresh, he just went on very quickly. And it was this tiny nose piece, bottom lip, jowls, and the neck. Wow. That was it. Wow. So in the end, it was and obviously there's a lot of paint, and obviously there was a bit of a stipple, but a lot of the pieces came off in the process of testing. You know, in the beginning, he was covered with cheek pieces, with the forehead piece, with eye pieces, and all of that went away and ended up being this very, very small, geniusly painted and executed makeup. But that was also, you know, it was down to 2.5 hours.
Wow. That's
which
good.
I think it's
very good. Yeah.
So we didn't have that. But it was in the pieces. I mean, Kazuhiro made this. It's incredible, actually, because it never, ever, ever, even close by, looked rubbery or anything. It was quite an extraordinary. But it was very, you know, the pieces came up to half up his face, and then down into his neck, and that was pretty much it.
Wow! It's genius. It's absolute genius, isn't it? Next question is, was you aware that your director of photography, DOP, Bruno Del Bonel, I'm going to say it, hopefully, was going to backlight Churchill as much as he did, and what problems did this cause? I was flabbergasted when I saw it with all the backlighting, and I thought, oh my God, that alone deserves every trophy it can get, you know.
It's interesting that you asked that question, but he did like him and him only. So in lots of ways, there must have been something at the front or whatever, because they looked after that makeup the entire time. Yeah. And they knew what they were going to do afterwards. So it was never all the harsh, you know, because the makeup stayed partially, you know, what prosthetic people hate the most is if you have skin and prosthetic overlap, you know, there was nothing overlapping. Then there's a pull on the skin, and there's an edge, and there's all those problems that you create by not having the full face of prosthetic. And they looked after that beautifully. They knew where those problems are, and they would, on the day when it was maybe a bit more pulley or something, they would turn him in lighting. So they looked after that entirely. And because of that, I think he did a great job, because he tried to make it look all realistic and not like it's being softly lit just for him and for the makeup, but they really did look after him. Every time he was on set, it was seamless. And sometimes in a corridor in a makeup room, you could really execute the harshness of the whole experience. So he was quite amazing, Bruno, I have to say, somehow in looking after the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I found so incredible about it. I mean, I think it's because there was quite a lot of shots with the window. I think it was more on the wig and everything. And it kind of just always looked so natural. You know, I remember kind of literally freeze framing it and going, Jesus Christ, I'd be having kittens. You know, it was just, there was a couple of shots, like where I'm sitting now, and all of us know when we deal with hair, that it's just like, oh, can you just, but I mean, it was so beautifully shot.
It was beautiful, but also, you know, when you think that hair was not very much hair, so it was all plastered down, and then they did afterwards in the post, they tidied all that up. They knew they would have to look after that, so they literally were very kind to all of it. So it did, you know, it was quite amazing how it all worked in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. I think your DOP is so important. I mean, you know, if I sort of say, whenever I'm doing a film, my first port of call, a costume designer, my DOP, set designer. I mean, it just all get together, because you guys literally are going to depend on each other.
Yeah,
it really can make or break. I mean, I've been able to, you can age people with the right DOP. You can actually age people like 10, 20, 30 years, can't you, without using any appliances. It's incredible. Right, so on to Anna Karenina. Obviously a very beautiful design, and again with Jo, the lovely Jo. The film is way out there and wacky as far as stylized work goes. How do you go about designing something so visual, and how close is your working relationship with Jacqueline, the lovely Jacqueline Durran, costume designer, and Sarah Greenwood, the set designer with the lovely cape?
Well, again, Jo is so visual that you kind of start your prep with lots of ideas and lots of research and lots of books and everything. Like you, one of my favorite people in the world, and like you're one of the favorite people in the world, is definitely Jacqueline Durran and Greenwood. I mean, you know, they're so incredible to collaborate with, and I totally depend on them. Totally, I feel like I'm part of the costume department, and at large, the art department when I work with them. You know, I always go to them, I ask them questions, I check everything with them, every design, every idea, and then they come back with something better, or they like what you bring to the table. So it's total collaboration. And when I'm not with people like that, I find it very, very odd when it doesn't happen. And it's very rare, I have to say. I've been very lucky to work with people like them a lot. And it's just incredible, because there's a safety and there's a huge amount of creativity in it.
Totally. Well, I'm a big fan of them, and all their work, both of them, Jacqueline and Sarah.
Yeah.
Another of your artist-director relationships is with Danny Boyle, who we all know and love. When you designed Trainspotting 2, how did you approach designing a sequel to such a cult film? And was Danny quite specific about how the gang had aged?
Well, as you know, Danny, actually probably better than me. I met Danny on Steve Jobs, which we'll come to later.
Yeah.
But by the time we got to Trainspotting, I obviously was, you know, I knew that Danny knows exactly what he wants and what he has in mind. But that's when I realized that Danny is so efficient. I don't know if I can find another word, at the most efficient filmmaker I have ever come across. So he knows you know, if he wants to run around Edinburgh with special cameras that you can film at night for 24 hours, and second unit, after we finish first units, do some more running, then what's important is that we can do that without having too many makeup and hair problems that we don't need, and too many costume problems. So things have to, things take a priority in Danny's mind, according to what's most important, I would say. And in Trainspotting, it wasn't, you know, we changed them a little bit. We discussed what we're going to do with those characters and what they would become. But it was very, very important not to overcomplicate things, and therefore stop him from taking the actors and to climb mountains and run down streets and not having to be checked. And And I do like that about Danny, that he's actually very practical and he won't overcomplicate things if he doesn't have to. He understands filmmaking so much that he knows that certain things you can't do. You know, so I had great ideas with little grey pieces and, you know, Spud to have a little grey hair and everything. And we tried it and it looked amazing. And he was like, well, then if it falls off when he's running, and I was like, you're absolutely right. There's no point. There's no point. So we did so little, but we did, you know, we did bits, and luckily they're all aged.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we didn't have to do too much makeup. But that's when I realized that Danny is so clever about, he knows what his problems are going to be on a particular film. And he tries to concentrate on them rather than create more by having complicated. But if you know, I always felt if I offered something up that's so amazing that will be changed, that would change the film entirely, he would go for it. But he's always like, oh, does this the good way up the bad side of this? And if the answer is no, we don't go for it.
You're so true. I mean, he is one of the most significant troubleshooting directors I think I've ever come across. He preempts every possible problem like that. This work, and I mean, I'm, you know, obviously having both worked with him, it's the speed of what he processes things. He's so articulate. What he wants, so visual. He's absolutely, every gene and blood cell in his body is a filmmaker.
Yeah,
there's nothing about him that can't kind of knit together. He's editing as he goes along. Don't need that. I need that. This is what I need. And as you so rightly said, he expects all of his crew to almost run with him for the whole party. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, I always remember saying to him at one point, I can't even remember I think we was on Sunshine or something, and I remember saying, I think my crew they just need a break, you know. And and he was just like, he just didn't get it. He was just like, what do you mean? He expects you to do as much as he can do and more.
And you know, I was on a television project with him in Italy where he thought, well, we can film in Rome in the middle of the summer between midnight and 5 a.m. because there's no one in the streets. And I was like, but that's a days off. That's Saturday and Sunday. And he was like, well, yeah, we'll just do an hour. And I was, okay, well, look, being on the Spanish Steps with Danny Boyle, doing a crazy chase of some religious icons going up the stairs with no one's there in a hot summer. But that means I had to do it because I didn't want to kill my crew. So I didn't have a weekend because I was outside with Danny running up and down the Spanish Steps.
I don't know. Do you know, I mean, I remember years and years back, I remember having a meeting about him, with him, about doing 27 Days Later. And I remember because I was working with Mike Lee at the time, and so the times weren't fitting. But I remember kind of talking to him about it, and he was sort of saying, you know, the eyes and the zombies and all the way before zombies were popular. And then I kind of remember sort of saying to him, you know, a lot of your shots are sort of central London, literally deserted central London. And he was just like, yeah, most of the shooting is going to be done from like midnight till 5 a.m. And you're just like, okay. I mean, he was just totally upfront about this is what we're going to do. And it was almost like he was stating the obvious to me.
Yeah.
You know, like I'd sort of pulled up something that was actually, he obviously knew damn well about, and stopped being so patronising, you know. Of course we're going to film at 5 a.m. on Tower Bridge.
Yeah, exactly. And look, but now it would be very possible to do that film again.
I've said that. When you see deserted London, you're just like, oh my God, look at what we could film there.
And it is that film. It is that film because it's the only time we've seen deserted London.
It really is. It really is. Right. So Steve Jobs.
Yes.
This was another lookalike role with Michael Fassbender, Steve Jobs. How far did you want to push the lookalike aspect of Steve? I watched it again the other day. It's a great film.
I need to watch it again, actually. But that's the film that I met Danny on and Michael. And it was Christmas time. So we started shooting on 18th of January, I'll never forget, because everything's closed till the 10th. So you have to have everything made before the Christmas break, then everyone goes away, and then you get your delivery the day before you start shooting of all the looks and everything, and then off you go. And I was like, oh my God, if it was only February, you know, you can test, you can have time. So I remember that being a nightmare, that particular time frame that you have to prep almost over Christmas when everything's closed. But when I discussed it with Michael and with Danny, I was like, okay, so we've got a film with Ashton Kutcher playing Steve Jobs that people didn't really like and people criticized a lot. And they actually, if you look at it, they did exactly what you would say that Steve Jobs looked like, especially when he was younger. Mm-hmm. So the problem with that, like with all the other lookalike kind of makeups and effects, is, you know, do we want to do something that's exactly like what you see, or do we want to do something that actually suits Michael and gives us the spirit of? And because I didn't know them both, I didn't know what their importance was for them. But very quickly, Danny said, no, we don't want to do exactly, but we need to feel that this is the man. So we had time to test second and the third look. But the first look, his first, not the youngest look, we had time to his long hair. That was kind of great. But the first conference, the first part of the 3 parts of the film, we didn't really have much time. And I struggled quite a lot with that look. I think I could have been much cleverer with that, because that was a bit of a copy of what real Steve Jobs had, kind of a bit of a bowl haircut, and I adapted it to fit, to suit Michael. It was okay, but I think, you know, I keep thinking about it over the years and thinking, you know, I'd like to do that one again. But it was great to know that we could finish with the short hair, because that suits Michael really well, and that's the iconic Steve Jobs. So you could do the clothes, you can arrive at what he became.
Yes,
and that was quite important to us. With Kate Winslet's character, what was great is that we had the real woman to work with and deal with, and she was like that. She was this Polish, Eastern European sensibility and dress sense, and you know, she had the accent and everything, and we could kind of go a bit more like the real person with her from the beginning. But the idea was really to go with the looks that suit people rather than the exact copy. We tried to make it, I tried to, like always really, but in that particular film, I tried to do whatever we did. I wanted people not to notice hair and makeup, just to kind of go with what was going on and arrive at the end and going, oh, well, they did change a bit, but not as much as they could have really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought Kate looked brilliant. I didn't realise that I was going to ask you that actually, partly because when she first appeared on screen, and she had that, it's like, I remember doing that asymmetric thing where you had to perm the hair first and then cut it into the asymmetric, and you just perm one half of it, and then, you know, and I just remember constantly doing that look on people. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. I mean, Kate is just brilliant anyway, isn't she? But I mean, yeah, I did love it. Did you, it looked to me like, when you're sort of saying about sort of the early haircut with Michael, the early wig, I kind of thought it was really good, because it looked to me like there was some original footage dropped in. But was there, or did he just do extra footage and then age it? Because there was a couple of little flashbacky, zappy things, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. Yes, so I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, it looked like it was original footage to me. So it all worked really well. It really flowed, and I kind of love that. I think it's one of the most important, crucial things when you're watching a film, is you don't, unless you're shouting out, you know, like with Anna Karenina and things, it's very stylish. Yeah. You want it to be big and bold. Yeah. But when it's a story about something that is kind of, you know, the whole story is you know, the Apple versus, you know, the Macintosh and all of this.
Yeah.
Computer world. And it's kind of almost like a different world. isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you just want people to get into that world with the, you know, the huge crowd conference things. And I know that they really do happen. Look at us talking like it's a totally different world that we're not used to.
Yeah, we used to.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Exactly. But those conferences are packed. They're packed, aren't they? And there was one bit where, and I thought, I wonder, because it was all set in the 80s. But did you kind of just go, okay, it's a huge, big mass of people. We can't get all of these audience ready. Let's just kind of ask everybody. Do you send out memos to people and sort of say everybody kind of just come very, you know, 80s-esque, you know, without fancy dress? And then that on a big crowd call.
Yeah, and in good Danny way again, he wanted real people, so they advertised for I think it was like 16,000 people for 2 days, and they, you know, they organized packed lunches and buses, and it was literally like an experience. You know, we have to do this as an experience to fill this auditorium because he wanted to shoot with a drone. It was the first time they used the drone inside.
Oh, yeah.
Inside.
You can wave it.
Heads. And then we chose, I think, 10 or 15 people that we made sure they looked like the 80s. And they did close-ups on them. The rest of it was just a mush of people. And it was more important to see that they were real people rather than duplicated. Yeah. And I think that's where he's so clever. And I would always trust him. Yeah. If he goes, no, don't need to do that, I would never argue and go, no, we do. You know, with some directors, sometimes you need to suggest things because from experience, you know better. But with Dan, you can go, absolutely, he's going to make it like 16,000 people. And amazing, because he's going to shoot in a way that is just about people, not what they look like. You're not going to zoom in on one person and go, that doesn't look like the 80s. Yeah. So, you know, that was amazing. It wasn't, and of course, because he wanted to shoot in Royal Opera House in San Francisco, till the little ballerinas came out for rehearsal. So for the entire time, the entire thing was night shoots.
Wow.
And that makes it, again, 10 times more difficult. But it was extraordinary because it was just us, the crew in this incredible building, and sometimes the 16,000 people. And it was this eerie time where we were making this film, and the actors had to learn 50 pages a day, and it was all shot in like one shot for 2 weeks, again and again and again and again.
I mean, there was so much dialogue in that film, wasn't there? And dialogue that you just can't. Yeah. I mean, I was just like, you know, I'm loving watching the film. The dialogue is totally going over my head a lot of the time because it is so. I mean, I learned that you know, OS stands for operating system. Do you know what I mean? That was my one big learning thing from that film. You know, however, you're so, you know, again with Danny, I mean, it's the practicalities and it's kind of the common sense, you know, and I know he did that on Yesterday that you did as well, didn't he? Where with the big crowd scene, is he just auditioned, told him to come down for that, you know, but basically a gig at the seaside.
Yeah. But being Croatian by birth, my mum, who's a complete, you know, she just goes to the movies 3 times a week, and she sees everything I do, but everything from Hungarian movies to Russian movies and American movies. Yeah. She couldn't enjoy Steve Jobs because, of course, they don't dub movies in Croatia, thank God, but you can't fit that dialogue on the bottom of the screen in 2 lines. So Mum was, it's a bit boring. I was like, but they can't translate in the ticker tape where all the 50 pages of dialogue, because you have to read it, so it can't go that fast. So actually a lot of that dialogue was lost on people in a lot of countries, which I only knew because my mum told me.
Oh God. Oh dear. No, listen, finally, there is one question that I need to ask you on behalf of my goddaughter, Sophia, because her favourite film is Little Women. You was the wig designer on that, wasn't you? But where was it filmed again? Because Jacqueline did that as well, didn't you? Well, obviously she won an Oscar.
Yeah, I got involved very early on with another costume designer was being involved, and lots of different situations happened with the clash of dates and different jobs and different things being pushed, and all sorts of things happened. In the end, Jacqueline did it. And because Jacqueline did it, and most of the actors, or at least half of the actors, were from England, a lot of the prep was here. So they asked me to actually prep it. And I had to come off it because I had another little job that I promised ages before to do. And so I couldn't finish Little Women. But I prepped the whole thing, and I did a month and a half in Boston with them. So they filmed in Boston, where the original story takes place.
Yeah. No, I always remember Jacqueline being very nervous about going away and leaving her children for a while, and just that there was no way she couldn't do it, because obviously every design on that costume design sort of shouts you to do it.
And it paid off, thank God.
God, yes, it did. Yay. Right, Pete, I'm going to throw the questions out to the audience now.
Okay. I mean, one thing that listening to the pair of you is, communication, interpretation, and having that experience and confidence as a makeup designer, because each director that you worked with, Ivana, it's a different, it's a completely different job. It's not just period or whatever. It's a different way of doing it, Danny and all the others. And it sort of ringed with sort of Chrissy saying that many times with our students, don't rush to be a makeup designer. Work hard, get there slowly, because you need that experience, because it sounds almost terrifying to someone like me, because it's quite daunting, to have all of that. One of the things, so there's quite a few people coming in asking about how you started in the industry. Now, I want to just add, obviously coming from a different country, starting your career in the United Kingdom, I'd read some, I think that you went to BBC, but had you set it all up and then came to London, or you just jumped?
No, so this is a story I tell a lot, actually, in interviews. And the situation was, I wasn't very academic, and I come from a very academic family. And I was really thinking for a long time, for about 2 years at the end of my secondary school, what am I going to do? Because what's expected of me is to go to university. Now, what am I interested in? What do I want to do? And somehow I came to the idea that because my parents went to the movies all the time, they took us to the movies and all of the different art forms, and when Dustin Hoffman seemed to be in every single movie, from to beyond, to look so different in every film. And I found out that there's actually a job, and then you see it on the credits, there was a job for makeup designer and hair designer. I thought, well, that's a really cool job. I quite like to do that. But how and where? And I found out that there is a course at the BBC that if you get into the BBC, they will train you for 5 years in an apprenticeship sort of situation, and then slowly going through the news, comedy programs, all the drama and everything. You might end up doing the Mohicans with Jenny Shercock, Scotland, putting ball caps on Scottish people, making them look like they are Native Americans. And I love that idea that you could become a part of an organization that will look after your learning. So I persuaded my parents to let me come to London, and for a long time, BBC then I think it was once a year at the time. There was a test that lasted for 3 months. There was 3 stages of this test. And with no experience of any kind, I was advised to do a makeup course. So I found the makeup course then called Grease Paint, which was run by Julia Cruttenden, who was a makeup and hair designer at the BBC. And she left the BBC at the time to run this course. And I thought I'd do that. But then I had to save the money, find the money for the course. So I then took myself off to America to be a nanny for a year to save the money. So that took another year. I came back, did the Julia Crattenden course, and then applied for the BBC. So that's now 2 years later, which I think is a good part of the story, because everything takes time. And that was a really and then when I did the course, I applied for the BBC, but at that time, BBC started dismantling. And it was actually, they stopped doing all the courses and everything the year after. And I was in the street again. I haven't done this course. I have managed to work with Jan Sewell, who was the last of the BBC makeup designers. We did a film called Bernard and the Genie, which is the first thing that Richard Curtis ever directed. I decided that I was going to do, I was heartbroken that I couldn't do exactly what I intended to do the BBC way. But that's when I realized that for me, that was the only way forward. I have to do 5 years apprenticeship, working with other makeup and hair people, and be at the bottom of the team, be literally a trainee into junior, then into a young member of the department, and slowly and surely work my way up. And it took me 15 years to become a designer, and I needed that 15 years. I wouldn't say that I could have done it any quicker. There were many, many situations, and even today, there are situations that I haven't been faced with, and I think, what is the proper way of dealing with this? And, in communication with producers, how people, and how to approach an actor, how to deal with lots and lots of processes in our job are very complex, and you need to learn them and be confident how to approach them. And that takes maturity, and I think that takes time.
I've always said to students, it's always been whenever we talk to students who want to come and do the course, apart from the fact that absolutely it was always essential for them to know there was going to be a trainee first and foremost afterwards, but also that thing of, guys, pace your career. Do not want to just jump into designing. Look at it as a 10-year trajectory, if you like. And honestly, take your time to get there, because there's so much to learn on the way. And I still don't sleep the night before we're filming. Because I think, I've gotten something, oh my God. And at the end, I'm just like, guys, we've got away with it again. We've done it. We've fooled them.
Yeah. And that's what I think is wonderful about the course I did. Was and one thing about your course is because they were both connected to the working makeup designers.
Very important.
And I think that's the only thing that's great. I mean, I had first-hand experience from someone who was saying exactly the same things, and saying, you're not going to make it unless you do X, Y, and Z. This is a very serious thing. This is nothing easy about this.
There really isn't. And I kind of thank God that what has happened over the years that we've had the makeup school is that we've kind of almost whittled it down to kind of sort of 3, 4 very good schools that are sort of taught by industry people, which I kind of think is great. Long may that last. At least we're kind of sort of going in the right way.
Yeah, very much so, because you don't portray it to be anything but hard work. It's wonderful work, but it's hard work. And you convey this to the students, and when they come to the set, they're very respectful.
Yeah.
Did you know from the beginning, Ivana, that you wanted to be a makeup designer, or it just seemed a natural sort of stepping stones upwards?
That's a very good question. I did not know I wanted to be a makeup designer at all. But as I was learning and progressing, and I was working with Jenny Shirker at the time, I would have been, if she said to me, you can work with me as my assistant till the day I die, or you die, or it's all over, I would have signed on that piece of paper. I enjoyed it so much, and I was very aware that I get to do all the fun things, all the wonderful makeups, and she takes all the problems, all the budgets, all the chats. I was very aware that my position is probably the best position in the whole wide world. So I wanted it to go on forever, but that can't be so. And So due to certain circumstances, I got offered a tiny, tiny little film. And I remember having to speak to my father about, what do I do? What do I do? If I peel myself off someone who I love working with so much, I'll be on my own and maybe rubbish. And he said, but you know, to achieve progress, you have to put yourself in that situation. And my big fear was that I was going to be totally rubbish. And I think that possibly drives us, like Chrissy says, you don't sleep the night before the shoot. You prep like the way you prep out of fear, because you want to be good. So you do the work because you think, oh, maybe this time they'll find out that.
Exactly.
Fear and love. Let's call it fear and love.
Exactly. We swim in mud.
Amy's asking, what was your first big movie or TV series that you worked on? And well, she does ask how you got there, but we know how you got there now. So what was the first, say, big one? And obviously, how terrifying was it?
Yeah, well, the first big one at the very, very beginning, I was very lucky to get a chance to work on Sherlock Holmes at Granada Studios. And that Sherlock Holmes was Jeremy Brett. And they still show those shows all over the world on some history, strange or movie channels. And they were amazing because they were 2-hour films or 1-hour episodes. And they were filmed over 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And you had 2 weeks prep for each one in between each one being filmed. So if you had that today on anything you do, you'd be so pleased, because for 2 weeks you can prep, you can do your fittings, you can do everything you need to, and then you film 1 hour in 6 weeks. Wow. And now we do 2 hours, the full film, in 6 weeks, and we don't have that much prep. So it was an amazing experience to work on something like that, to experience that. But that was then very quickly after the experience, everything changed in the industry, and we became more efficient with time and money. And we, as makeup artists, had to adapt, and we had to become faster. We had to do things without seeing people. You know, the first wig fittings I remember doing with the makeup designer on that, she had 3 wig fittings at Ray Marsden's with every actor, and we would take the actors from wherever we were down on a train from Manchester to Ray Marsden's in London for 3 wig fittings. Now you can only do that for your lead. You can't do that for every actor. So that was the first big job when I was very young. And then as a designer, I think the first very big job was Cold Mountain, because all the other films as a designer I did were tiny. There were like 2 people in it, 3 people. And suddenly, I suppose the hours was quite big, but then Cold Mountain was massive. And that terrified me.
Now we've mentioned TV and film. So you've worked TV, you've done film, you've designed theatre, and you've worked with theatre. Is there the particular genre that you would love to do all the time? I know it's obviously film you're most on, but would you, if theatre came up, would you do theatre, or would you do any genre? Are you happy with either of them?
Yes, I would do any genre. And in fact, you know, the only job I have at the moment, apart from the television series that still needs to be finished over in Philadelphia in the US, I've got this, possibly, if it happens, I hope it does, this lovely, incredible theatre job that it's a dance piece they want to do completely in black and white. So it terrifies me, because I don't really know at all how to do it. And I have to figure it out. And I can't, at the moment, I'm kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in our theatre world. It doesn't look very good till next year. But it will come back. It will all come back one day, but slowly. So there are theatre projects which I would absolutely love to do. But film, I would say, having done a lot of television now, television is amazing to watch. Television is amazing because we can do things that maybe sometimes we can't do on film, because different networks allow you to do different things and there's less censorship. But I love film. I love the storytelling and the attention to detail that we can do with film that you can't do with television.
Yeah. There's lots of questions, Ivana. I mean, because of, again, you know, anyone looking at what your list of films is, lots and lots of period pieces. Could you give us just a, you know, how do you go about research? Is there a particular way, any particular books, or, you know, how do you do it?
Well, I do love books. All these books in the background, actually, that's the research library. So I do kind of spread them all around the flat, and I buy them. I do buy books in their physical form, and of course I research online. And I'm getting a bit obsessed about expanding my research ability, having worked with people like Jacqueline and Sarah Greenwood and people who research in depth because of their particular jobs. They kind of research for all of us, not just production design or costume. They research into situations and all sorts of jobs and different things. So I do start with books. I try and find, I think that's something that I would like to learn and spend time learning, expanding my research ability, because I think that's where the real cleverness lies.
That's probably the true answer. Do you go to libraries? Do you use the sort of like the public library or the British Library and that kind of thing?
Yes, and there's an amazing thing, part of British Libraries, called a Europeana. And it's something they linked every museum in the world is online, and everything that's in them is online.
Oh.
So you can go and research museum in Moscow, Helsinki, everything as part of this website. It used to crash a lot because it's obviously a lot to put up. So I go onto that a lot, and I would physically go to museums, I go to galleries, and I go to libraries. Yeah.
Hello, it's a great thing. There's a few people, you know, Laura and Tracy and Tina. With regards to your main team, your team, do you change your team? How do you choose your team? What do you do?
Well, every time I leave this country to go and work in the States, I have to leave on my own. I usually can't take anyone with me. Unless you're doing a film that's already filming in this country, then you can take your team. And those are the moments that I use, that I lose my team that I usually have for years or for a long time, because they go on and join other teams. So in my life, I had to change my team quite a few times, or I would say broaden my team. But I think that there's nothing about the designer without their team. You are your team, and it is crucial to well match your actors to your team, to your to makeup artists that you're working with. So I try to work with the same people if I can, but also when you can't, then there's an opportunity to meet new people, and there are so many clever new people, you know. And I love the fact that there's new people coming out all the time, and I think I can learn so much from the newer generation. I think it happened. I remember suddenly feeling like I wasn't the youngest on the film set anymore. Suddenly I was one of the oldest. It was the most horrifying experience when you realize that it's not part of that crowd anymore. And I love the new crowd that comes up, and the young ones, and the new ideas and new fashion and new knowledge, and so it's great to meet new people all the time.
No, that's good. People are asking, as a new sort of graduate trainee, are there any tips you would give, let's say, for someone approaching you as a new trainee on your team? Oh, have I gone?
Yes, I would listen. No, you're there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I would say listen. I would say listen carefully and watch everyone carefully. And I remember thinking, what if one day, if I learn how to do all these makeups that, say, Chris is doing or another makeup designer is doing, if I learn by watching quietly, but not to be noticed, be quiet and listen and learn. And if one day someone's late to work or they don't come to work, And they go, well, can you do it? A bit like the understudy in the theatre. I was like, yes, I can. I've learned how to. So I think you need to just be really patient, take your time, watch and listen and learn, and just be very eager to do anything that's thrown your way.
No,
that's so true about watching. Watch all the time. You can learn so much by watching. And I've always, sometimes at the end of the day, just taking the wigs off, you will learn so much. You'll learn how that hair's wrapped underneath. You know, you will learn everything.
But it doesn't mean that you stand behind someone's head and make them see that you're watching them. Just always position yourself somewhere where you can watch without being noticed or without being in their face or anything like that, and just watch everything. How someone goes in for checks, how someone start their day, how they take the wigs off. Everything is knowledge. And I do think that that's one thing that I remember thinking, I'm going to just steal everyone's knowledge. I'm going to watch so much that I'm going to steal it for me. I'm going to watch everything they do. That's all I can do. Because there's no, you know, that's where you really can soak up everything, everyone, but you have to watch and you have to notice.
You really do. I always remember Polaroiding Christine Cantor when I was her trainee. I remember Polaroiding her place, and I just thought, and because she used to get through so many trainees, I just thought I have to make myself the best trainee she has ever had. You know, and I literally worked so hard at it. I really do. I mean, I worked with her for ages, but I mean, we still laugh about it to this day. I was literally like, I was determined that I was going to be better than anybody, you know. And like you say, I watched her all the time. I knew her movements on stage. Before she even turned around, I knew she was looking for me. You know, and I knew if she asked for something off of her place, I knew where it all was. Yeah, it's really important. What?
It's all of that. And then when something goes wrong and you need to be the one that takes up the, you know, pieces and everything, that's also a great position to be in, because you can really help the department. So being a trainee, I would say, for me, was the happiest time, because you couldn't do anything wrong, but you can do so right by doing all of that. So I love being a trainee or the junior. I would say being the young person in the department can be so, everyone loves you. You can be so helpful. You can bring people joy by being helpful with their, you know, bringing them coffee or tidying up their place, but also watching and knowing what's going on, having all the information, learning the schedule, learning the script, suggesting things, and then you can second guess your boss and be so helpful. So I would say being a trainee is wonderful, but be patient.
Gosh, I mean, you make it sound, you know, and which it is, it's incredibly exciting and a wonderful opportunity. And it's almost tragic sometimes if it does happen when you get to that position, you take on a trainee and they almost don't bother, you know, for whatever reasons. And I find that kind of tragic because of, like, you know, watching, listening, observing, all these things. It's going to make you a great makeup artist one day. You know, patience is a virtue. Gosh, we are running out of time, Ivana. So one of the last questions I have to ask is, all your palettes of makeup is washed away, but you've managed just to save one palette. What palette did you save? Which is it?
Oh my God. And this is the first answer that popped into my head. And it's probably not true, but I'm going to say and explain. It will be Kryolan Rubber Mask Grease. And that is because Jenny Sherko did everything out of that palette. And I learned to do every graze, wound, everything out of that. But now it's not true. It wouldn't be that anymore. It would probably...
We all say that. Everybody says that. We all say it without even hesitating. It's because it's like a trusted friend. It really is. It's like your trusted friend.
Yeah. It would be that. But then now we've got so many wonderful palettes that we new tattoos. You know, there's so many things. Makeup has become, you know, when we started, Chrissy, it was only Visiora.
Yeah. Which I still like, you know, I still think it's great. However, I mean, it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's like when people sort of say, you know, about makeup and things and what makeup brand should you use? I'm just like, do you know what, guys? The makeup brands are so significantly brilliant now. I mean, you can even go into Boots and get a good range of makeup.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you can get anti-shine out of Boots. You can get loads of stuff. You know, you don't need to keep going into, you know, Chanel or you know, any. It doesn't need to be like that. However, you know, I've always maintained to this day that you know, you can, as long as you've got your lightest color and your darkest color, you can pretty much get
exactly.
You know, it's kind of like you've got to learn. You know, it's be clever with your color.
Yeah, and you got to think about it, because you have so many products. I think it's very easy to get lost in what product do I use. Actually, you have to think about what you want to achieve first.
Yeah,
and you can figure out the product.
And you need to know different ways of making everything. Sorry, Pete, we're going to go on forever here, aren't we?
Yeah,
you could be doing that, like it's like, wrap it up, guys, wrap it up. You're about to cut off.
Can't get a word in edgeway with you two. No, but I love asking that last question, because literally you, Daniel, every single designer, that beautiful old grease paint palette that you know, we should be able to keep saying we'll do something. Ivana, my love, it was absolutely lovely. The hour has flown by.
That was so wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you. Stay safe.
If you're in town, you know, if you're in Camden, pop in for a cup of tea. We're kind of hoping everybody that's coming to our design rooms comes in and it's like, does a little cup of tea with us.
Cup of tea.
You're all welcome to use the school for anything. You know that.
I will do. Definitely.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye bye.